Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com presents the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com.
All right, hey everybody, welcome to episode 389 of the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. I'm your host, Anthony Renna. The show notes are located at strengthcoachpodcast.com. All right, today on the strengthcoach.com and NBSC.TV Coach's Corner, I spoke to Coach Boyle about an exercise that he feels he's not programming enough, alternating forward lunges. Wanted to get his thoughts on why he feels they're important, and also his thoughts on adding a high knee to that. We also spoke about understanding how hard getting to 90% heart rate is. This comes from a tweet about a lot of people posting about being above 90% and how we really underestimate our max heart rate. For the Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach segment, I have on Ryan Van Asten. He is the author of Complete Conditioning for Hockey, former NHL strength coach, Stanley Cup winner with the LA Kings, 2 times actually. He's in the private sector now. We're going to talk about lessons from working with Luge athletes. Thought that was pretty interesting when he was with Team Canada. Understanding energy systems development, whether or not he feels about like this idea about a base, how if that's important, other tools to improve VO2 max, oxygen deficit and oxygen debt and how they relate to the warm-up and cool-down, differences between in-season and off-season training, and then some thoughts on coaching, mindset, intent, culture, relationships, that and so much more for the Naamly Maximizing the Member Experience with Sumit Seth, founder of Naamly. Sumit's going to talk about instilling a sense of responsibility with members, with referrals, reviews, community events, and even having members help ramp up new members. So kind of an interesting take on this, this idea, like taking it to another level with your members. We're going to continue our 4-part special series with Allie Gilbert, the queen of men's health and the founder of the Silverback Summit. This series is on testosterone replacement myths and misconceptions. Don't forget, Allie will be doing the Silverback Summit. This year, it's November 15th and 16th coming up. It's in Phoenix. I'll be there. I'm pretty excited about heading out there. You can use the code AllieG200 to get $200 off. Pretty cool. You can do all that at silverbacksummit.com. In part 3, she's going to talk about how TRT is not really the be-all, end-all that some people make it out to be, in terms of like they think if you go on it, all of a sudden you're jacked, you don't do the work. So she's going to kind of dispel some of those myths. Guys, Perform Better has a new signature series line, and it's changing the game when it comes to weight training, especially if you have a facility and you know, like sometimes we're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, and the signature series racks, they're fully customizable. They allow you to create the most efficient and effective rack system to fit your space and your weightlifting program. There's also cable column options now, so it makes training opportunities endless. There's also the Signature Series plate-loaded line. That's going to give you a sleek look, providing an easy and simple way to train. You can check it all out at performbetter.com. Lots of things to get to, so let's get on the phone with Coach Boyle. All right, guys, now it's time for the ShrinkCoach.com and NBSC.TV Coach's Corner with Coach Boyle. You can try ShrinkCoach.com out for 7 days for free. Same thing with NBSC.TV, where you're basically a fly on the wall at NBSC with staff meetings, programs, seminars, in-services from top coaches, all good stuff. The forum is still running strong. Kevin Carr actually just did a great post on it. Actually, when I got on the phone with Coach, he was looking for a video because somebody asked a question on ShrinkCoach.com and he wants to pull that video up. So, Coach, how you doing?
I am doing well, Anthony. How are you? I got to get a cool backdrop like you, though. I just have this beautiful ocean view, you know, and you've got like a cool Strength Coach podcast, Perform Better.
Yeah, man. That's because I'm in my closet, too. So it's like kind of like, you know, the closet's one of the best places to record. So I have a hard enough time doing it. So there we go.
Joke in there somewhere, but I'll just leave it alone.
Yeah. In this day and age, we better not say anything. Mike, you just did a post, the best exercise. We don't do enough alternate lunges, I guess, just forward. There are forward lunges, alternating legs, right? The only exercise we perform that deals with deceleration. Don't confuse forward lunges with walking lunges or slide board lunges. Both are good exercises, but accelerated pulls. I do want to ask a little bit about this, Coach. Have you expand on that? Have you not been doing this? Forward lunges much?
Honestly, no. We've done tons of split squats, rear foot elevated split squats, one leg squats, and it was kind of like lunges ended up being one of those ones that didn't make the cut. And then actually with kind of going through with Mark going through his ACL stuff and then dealing with other kids with ACLs, I started to realize, wow, the thing we're really not getting is that plant and push back kind of effect. We're getting lots of plant, whether it's through landings in our plyos or whether it's through, split squat, like we said, a rear foot elevated split squat, but it's not that sort of put the brake on and then push yourself back to whatever neutral start position. It ends up being one of those exercises. And I have to consciously, sorry, I'm squirming around here, but I have to consciously work it back into the program because it just doesn't appear a lot. So even if I pull up, because a lot of times when I program, I just pull up an old template and start working from there and then think about what I want to change. And very, very frequently, I just don't find the lunge, the actual alternating lunge, as a go-to in my mind. And I need to make it that. I need to think like, okay, I need to, and actually I'm going to post, the next one is a sort of I hate to say it's a rotational lunge, but it's a lunge with a rotational driver where we're using a med ball. We're using something to produce some transverse plane force while we're doing that alternate lunge. Because I think that's really your injury mechanism. When you start looking at that and saying, okay, I'm trying to get that foot plant, and in that foot plant, I'm trying to decelerate some rotational torque. So it's sort of the second phase of that alternate lunge pattern is even more important.
Mike, are you doing them in the warm up though? Like, so for example, I know there was a time you were doing like kind of a lunge matrix or a squat matrix, right? You were doing a split squat matrix,
That's what I mean. We've done some split squat matrix. We probably don't even really do that as much. Like I know in my warm up, we would do, I really like a back lunge. I call it back lunge front hamstring, so you do a back lunge, stop, and then you try to straighten the front leg, get your front hamstring, but it's much more flexibility orientation. And it's just, even in that warm up part, it's one of those things that sort of, we were talking about today, things go by the wayside. And then you sometimes, I was talking actually with Jess Tolman about this today about the rock mats and, and doing, rolling our feet or, it was like Hunter Eisenhower was talking about spiky balls on the feet or, all this stuff. Same thing. Really good idea. We should be doing it more. We don't do it enough. And we almost need to make that list of things that we think are really good ideas that we don't do enough, because when you're dealing in time constraints, you start cutting things out. And then sometimes you realize, wow, we cut out some important things, or we cut out some things that have a very high value. So that's where I was writing up some 1x20 stuff, because I'm going to try some 1x20, I think, with Mark and his friends when they come home from school. So when they'll be home, say mid-December to mid-January, and I'm going to play with like a reverse 1x20, because the 1x20 theoretically is like 20, 14, 10. So I'm going to try to go like 10, 14, 20, 14, 10 over 5 weeks. But I'm trying to think, all right, how many exercises and how do I want to do it? And then I get into that. All right, lower body. All right, I want to do one leg squat. I want to do skater squat. I want to do Nordic. I want to do trap bar deadlift. I want to do slide board lunge. And you start thinking, well, all right, how many do I want to have? 100 reps of lower body? Probably not, right? So you got to start looking at it and thinking, all right, what's actually going to be in there? But I've got to look at it and think, okay, alternate lunge has to be in that 1x20 for 5 weeks.
Yeah, and I think something like the rock mat, going back to like when you're making those decisions about, rolling the feet, et cetera. Sometimes for me, I take the things out that I really feel like all right, we went over this for a bit with these people, but it's something that they can really do on their own at home, et cetera. So sometimes, like you said, with the time that you have with them, it's tough. I do the lunge matrix with arm drivers, kind of very Todd Wright type thing, especially really even kind of brought it back because when you do the forward lunge, the side lunge, and then the rotational lunge, I think we're getting all three planes of motion with the lower body, but then using those arm drivers in sagittal, a side bend with each in each position and a rotation, arm driving rotation in each. I feel like we're getting really we're really kind of checking that box. And again, let's go back. This is my lens, the population that I'm dealing with for the older, somebody who's older. I really feel like they're not getting any of this ever. They're not playing a sport. Yeah, they are. They're playing a little pickleball here and there, a little golf. But yeah. So I feel like it's super important, especially with all the talk about fascia, right? Especially now, like understanding how important it is and getting all this stuff in. So, but it is tough to kind of, what do you take out? What do you put in?
Right. It's so hard. I actually just did a Zoom call with Todd. What's today? Today's Thursday, Tuesday, with the University of Minnesota staff, because the University of Minnesota football strength coach Dan Nicholas, a Springfield grad who was an intern for me, and so he's kind of been bringing in people, and he ended up pairing Todd and I up, which was great. And Todd gets me thinking about that. But we both had the same thing. We were talking about barefoot, and we were like, oh, yeah, we should be doing more barefoot stuff. But just the shoes on, shoes off, people tying them, it ends up same thing, goes by the wayside. And I guess, I don't know. You got to commit to stuff more. You got to believe in stuff more. I don't know what it is, but I've got to get myself to think, oh, all right, I'm going to view these as essentials. They've got to be in there. We've got to be doing something with, uh, something bottom of the foot. We've got to be doing that. That, like, as I said, that decelerative pattern, that braking pattern is the one that we don't get. And we get lots of the kind of accelerating pattern, the straight pushing, down to up, very, I guess if we're looking at it, it's very vertical in orientation. A lot of what we're doing, whether it's split squat, one leg squat, whatever it is, it's the elevator. And it's instead what we're thinking about is, no, I need to do something where I'm stopping that downhill action.
Yeah. It's funny, you talk about the barefoot stuff too. One thing I just try to focus on with my people is I'm very into Vivo barefoot, right? So I'm always wearing that, whether that's even in the woods, I have their boots, which are very minimalistic. And then same thing with in the gym. But your population, for example, I have a triathlete and I'll do jump, throw, sprint with her. But the sprint is not, I don't have the room to do regular sprints on turf. We'll go on one of those curves, but I won't do it. I don't do it with her because she's into the barefoot shoes, and I don't want her running on those because I just don't. She doesn't run enough on them, doesn't wear them enough, only wears them to the gym. So I'm like, all right, that's an accident waiting to happen. So now there's a balance for me. I know with you, sprinting is everything over there. So yeah, it's a tough call that all of a sudden, hey, wear your barefoot shoes, and then you're not really sprinting in them, and then you're worried about stress
Yeah,
fractures.
some of our kids who started sprinting barefoot. So kids took their shoes off, experimenting.
Okay.
It's yeah, it's it's interesting. You start looking at that and saying, okay, even with us, and this was a Dan Paff idea, but we'll bike sprint, like we'll go and do 10-second bike sprints and tell them, try to get over 80 RPMs, just so that if they can't land sprint, we still want to get some sort of high turnover, high power output, lower body exercise. And it fills that block where you have somebody say, oh, someone's like, oh, I'm not sprinting. And you don't want them just standing there. You don't want to say, okay, you're going to stand here for 5 minutes while we run sprint. No, go ahead and hop on the bike, just blast out 4 10-second sprints. And I've said this, we do 10-second sprints, although people say it's not a sprint, it's too long. I agree, you're right. But if you do 5-second sprints on those assault bikes with stronger athletes, you blow the bikes up, you blow chains off, you blow pedals off. So 10 seconds keeps it, kind of.
I've been doing 7 with my adult. So I believe it or not, I've been doing 7.
Yours probably can't get our guys, like I said, in 7.
They're not breaking.
Like I said, I remember, Mike Greer one time we were trying to do 5:25. We were doing like 5 on, 25 off, trying to do like a real kind of, ATP kind of, workout. And he sheared the pedal right off the bike, like on about the second one. And luckily he didn't cut himself, but it just, just broke it right off. And I was like, okay, this really isn't going to work. We're probably going to break all the pedals off this, every bike this week will have the pedals broken off as these big, strong guys start trying to blast out 5-second sprints. Either that or they're going to rip the chains off or something bad will happen.
Did they have you? Were you part of the fundraising, like sending out letters? Hey, Mike, remember all those pedals you broke? Be a nice time to kind of give back to the school. Coach, let's go back to the lunge. Peter Twist had, and coincidentally, Kevin Neal just posted some videos or sent out an email on some of the lunges he's doing. And Peter Twist had responded to your Instagram post, like try picking up the knee as high as possible, secure balance in that start position, lunge the foot. I don't know what that is, but landing significantly longer on the stride. My question was not, are you worried about how long the stride is? He's talking about deeper hips, tall torso, more purposeful arms heading into the legs. But that knee, Kevin and Tim for the Bruins were doing like kind of pulling the knee way up, kind of pausing and then coming down. Would you find any value? Do you feel like, or just want to get those lunges in for the decelerative piece?
I don't see the value because I don't think that's what happens. I think, when you're decelerating, if you're thinking about that break, stop, step, you're not coming out of a high knee situation. You're probably coming out of kind of a breaking down, a lowering your center of gravity type of situation. So I wouldn't see that as super real world. So I'd have to, sometimes I like to watch people's videos and look and see, okay, sometimes I think, I get what they mean. I understand why they might be going for that, but I don't see the value in that for what at least for what we're trying to pull out of it.
Yeah, for me, I definitely want to incorporate those just from the perspective of, balance is always a huge issue with the older population. So Mike learned a big lesson a couple of weeks ago. I was actually, my hockey right now has been limited to stick and puck because, I have no friends and they won't let me on a team. I got waitlisted on the men's league. It's amazing. I can't believe I cannot get into a league right now.
You're an outsider. Why?
Yeah, exactly. So I did this little workshop.
New York Italian on their team.
I know, it's amazing. So there was this kind of like 2-hour workshop, like adult. Hey man, before your league starts, I was like, oh cool, maybe I'll meet somebody, but I wanted to, play with other people too. We did some short-sighted games. I had the heart rate monitor on. Man, and this goes with a thread that's been going on with Twitter, and you were talking about, you had posted about how people don't understand how hard 90% is. And I didn't realize, Mike, when I saw that you were 184, I was like, wow, because I've seen like 173 for me, and that's through exercise, through the Airdyne or whatever, doing a lot of work, like going hard, trying to get it up there. I got up to 184 on when we were playing these short-sided games. I was like, holy cow, I didn't even realize. Like later afterwards, I'm like, wow, that was amazing. So I just realized how important, how bad those estimates would be. My estimate at 57 would be 163. So 21 beats off if I use that estimate. So just wanted to touch on this idea about, heart rate estimates and understanding how important that is to use that monitor and get them up really high to determine that highest level.
Yeah. Well, one, as you said, I think fit older adults are way off the formula. I think the formula is way off anyway. I think what you see with the formula with the lower number with adults in the 220 minus your age thing is just indicative of them probably not being fit enough to get their heart rate up. I don't think there is as much age-driven decline as we think there is. And I know, I can only do the sort of end of one study. But if I look at mine hasn't declined very significantly. I don't know when the last time was I saw anything in the 190s, but I will tell you for 10, 15 years, I've been hitting mid 180s once, twice.
Wow.
And I haven't had any adjustment down over that time period. You would look at it and think, hey, over that 10 years, I should have been steadily, 84, 83, 82. I should be at a point where I don't break 170. It's not happening. But I don't think people are studying our population in that way in terms of looking and saying, oh, I wonder, because again, probably a relatively high risk if you said, hey, I want to start trying to elicit maximum heart rates from people in their 60s and 70s. right?
Yeah, no.
But as you said, sometimes in that, like you throw your monitor on, you play a small-sided game like that, and suddenly you think, wow, I hit a number that I only thought about. The other thing that happens, and theoretically, like if I could run, I might get higher than 184 because I'm getting 184 on the bike. And everybody's saying, oh, the bike is harder to get higher. But my larger point was just that, when they say, this guy, and it was just a post, I forget who it was, but he said, time over 90% is critical. And I'm thinking, if time over 90% is critical, then I'm doing these horrible interval workouts with Joe where we are killing it. I mean, I'm talking about 80% of the people in the world would not want to do these workouts with us. They are really, really unpleasant. And in spite of the unpleasantness of that workout, I might get in a 20-minute workout, I'm going to say I get 2 minutes over 90, maybe 3 minutes at most. And it's hard. I mean, getting up, you like sometimes I'll blip up over 90. Like I'll look and think like, oh God, I saw red there on the MyZone screen for 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And then boom, that's like at the very tail end of the interval. And we're doing, like I said, we're doing the, 4 times 4 minutes. I would literally challenge anybody. I'd say, hey, come and do the 4 times 4 minutes with us, but do it the way we do it, 4 times a mile and a half. And I want you to do mile and a half at, race pace. So for us, race pace is probably like 235 miles, right? So we're looking at it and saying, if you can get a mile and a half consistently under 4, you're going pretty good. And we would do Joe might be 345, I might be 350-ish. And it's literally, when you talk about gut wrenching, it's gut wrenching. Like you're dying at the end. I did it the other day with him and I couldn't finish. The third one was like, I think I did 359 or 402 or something. I mean, I just didn't have anything left in the tank at the end. And that was where I got a glimpse in the red, but it's really, really hard to do. And I guess my other point, my other larger point is I sometimes look at these people and think, are you actually doing these workouts yourself? And if you are doing these workouts, do you really know, like, have you done, because again, maximum heart rate, I would look and say, even in an MAS test, 2-mile airdyne, right? We're going to do our 2-mile assault bike. You're not going to get to 100%. I'm going to get my 100%, and I think some of it is what they call cardiac drift, tends to be like if I do a 5-mile time trial, 5-mile time trial, I'll break 180. But 2-mile time trial, I won't. 2-mile time trial, I might get 174 because I just won't be on there going long enough, going hard enough to keep kind of drifting up, kind of riding it, because it's I think the time that you're riding at or above that threshold pace, that's what kind of drives you up above 90. But as I said, it's not an easy place to go to. And I think if you get there really easy, more than likely it's probably because you don't have a good estimate of what your max heart rate is. And I would say, okay, let's see what your, even then, like, if I know if your 2-mile time is under 5 minutes, right? You're able to do 2 consecutive miles under 230. Then I would look at it and say, all right, then you got to be able to, if you can ride 5 at 12:30, then I want to see what your heart rate is. Like, give me 5 230 miles back to back. And it's hard. I just think people, and I've said this about a lot of things, whether it's strength training or whatever it is, people throw numbers around like they know what they're talking about. And when they throw those numbers around like they know what they're talking about, I look at it, it makes me think they don't know what they're talking about. They're not actually doing these things with their athletes, or they're just doing it with themselves. Again, like me, maybe these are people who are doing these kind of N of 1 studies and think, okay, this is really applicable across the board. I know for us, that's why one of the things we always advocate for our coaches, I always tell them, do the workouts. It's unpleasant, but I want you to get on the bike. I want you to do, Joe and I did one time because Charlie Weingroff came. Charlie was talking about, he likes to do above 90% effort, which is different. So he wants you to be, so, we would do so we did miles, we did mile, rest, mile, but we did it kind of Charlie Weingroff style, which is you want both miles to be 95 to 98% effort. So if I know, like, my best single mile ever is 216, I was like, all right, if I want to be 98%, I got to try to be like a 220 mile, so I got on, and I mean, we rode like it was, same thing, mile race pace, rest, let our heart rate come back down, another 1 mile race pace. And I think we did, 220 and 227 or something like that. And those are different because now you're looking at percentage of effort, but even percentage of effort, I look at and say, has to be based on your best time. So you can't say, when people say, oh, go 90%. I look at it. So if I know, for me, 230 mile, right? So that's basically 150 seconds. So 90% is 165 seconds. 90% is a 245 mile. That's not very hard at all.
Yeah.
Knowing, but, again, 216 best mile, 90% is about a 230. Again, not really that hard. You get up to 95% where you're really doing it by the numbers, pretty hard.
Yeah.
And then you think, 98, 100. Like I said, for people, I have, like, I could sit here, like, if I could share my screen with you, I have 890 either Airdyne or assault bike workouts that I've recorded. Those are just the ones I've recorded.
Yeah.
I can tell you what the paces are going to be and what the time should be and what really is going to be. Okay, someone said, go 80%. I mean, 80%. If you looked at 80% of the best time, is like zone 2 work.
Yeah.
Even though it's supposed to be 70, but if I did 80% effort, I would be down, in the 70% heart rate. And then somebody else Mark Bennett brought up a really good point. Heart rate and VO2 max, are not necessarily linear. But the one thing I had said in response to that was heart rate was all we have. So when we're looking at, we do it by heart rate because I think it's the best available proxy, even if it's not necessarily the best, 100% correlated.
Yeah. And like we just talked about, why this conversation came up, and when you're not looking at that heart rate, for me, you learn a lot of lessons when you do that. Cause I did the MAS, you're right, 2-miler, and I think it was 174. And then I go and do this thing, and, probably in the, hour, and we're an hour and a half in, and we start doing these short side, and now I'm at 184, and it's a completely different, and I can compare that to the crash bees. And you make a good point about doing it yourself. You don't know pain until you're with Joe. So I think specifically working with somebody who's a lot younger and strong, and you kind of like, you want to keep up with him, you want to get those numbers, and we're always going to want to, and so even for me, crash bees at the time was it's just you're out there, you're on the rower, that's it. But you're trying to beat your PR. And each time I was like, I thought I was going hard. I thought I was going hard in training after my first year. And then I was like, wow, you just crushed this. You could go a lot harder. And then you start to see, oh, you can go harder. You can go harder. And you got to keep playing with it.
I love the road till the road didn't love my back.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I mean, I can remember those, like, I can remember literally, like, because we do 500 meter pieces with my rowing friends. And I mean, you would fall off, like literally just fall off the side of.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's why that was what led me really years ago, because I started out training rowers, God, in the early 90s. And that's what led me to the old Airdynes, because that was the first thing we found that had some similarity to that awful feeling that you had when you got off that rower. I mean, you got off the rower, thought, okay, it's as bad as it gets. And the rowers were really good at threshold work. Really good. Like, they knew exactly, like, and they'd be dialed in. That's where I started getting, like, the bike. They'd be dialed in on that rower. They'd be like, okay, I got to be 148, 500
Yes.
pace. You know what I mean? Like, they knew exactly, and they were looking, they were staring that thing down. And that's what I started to do with the assault bikes. Like, after a while, because I could tell people exactly, like, okay, you want to ride this time, you got to ride 68 RPM. So people will be like, are you sure? I'm like, positive. You can't do it. If you can't ride 68 RPMs the whole time, you can't do it. And people are like, oh, I got to sprint at the end. I'm like, no, you're not. If you think you are, you're wrong. And some of the pro guys can. Some of the pro guys have so much in the tank that they actually can. Like we have some guys who, you look and think, okay, they got nothing left, and then they do have stuff left. Whereas for me, I have to pace it. Like I know exactly I can be right where I need to be, but I also know it's hard. Even, that's why people say, oh, you can improve your time by 10%. I'm like, I can't improve my time by 10 seconds over 5 miles, no matter how hard I try. I'll ride 5 miles sometimes and improve by 1 second. I look and think, how could I, how could I go from 1250 to 1249 with the amount of effort that I just expended for 1 second? But
Yeah, I agree, because those increments that you improve are so. I did, I was 709 the first time I did it. The 2,000 meters, and it was 708, and then
right,
it was 658. Then it was 701, right? So like I just could not improve, and you, like you said, you're looking at that number. I'm looking at, I need to be at 145 to break the 7-minute barrier, right?
yeah.
145. And then you could sprint at the end, just because I'm trying to get to 658 or 659. So it's 1 second difference. I can sprint the last 30 seconds, but
You almost can't. Like you think, like the time that you did 701, you probably wanted to do 657, but you can't summon that. Like that's one
no.
thing I said to people, and I started saying to people, because I had a guy one time come to me and say, he was trying to alkaline water, and he said, oh, if you drink this alkaline water, it'll cut 10% off your time. And I looked at him, I said, really? He said, so my 2-mile time is 5 minutes. I said, so that's 300 seconds. So you're saying I'm going to do a 4:30 if I drink this alkaline water? I said, when I have killed myself to do 4:59 after doing 5 minutes, killed myself. And you're going to tell me that I drink this water and I'm going to lop and I did it. I started doing, when people would tell me that stuff, I would do the experiment. Oh, do this, do that, use the power play, drink this water. Nothing moved the needle ever.
Cocaine, even?
No, I didn't.
I haven't tried that yet. Yeah, I know, it's so true. And like you said, it's comes from a lot of people who really haven't gotten on themselves. So, um,
It just, to me, it absolutely establishes that, okay, this person hasn't done it.
yeah, yeah. Coach, one quick one on this, going back to this too. Have you been able, since you're so dialed in with this, heart rate is obviously such a great way to understand where you're at. Have you been able to tell that you're getting sick from your airdyne workouts? Like, yeah, I just got a 502 things. No, you haven't been able to.
You know what's crazy? I can tell you that almost every time before I've gotten sick, I've gotten a personal best the day before.
Really? I wonder, because everything's working, maybe. The whole immune system's going. I don't know.
I don't know what it is, or maybe you tap your system out and then you're depleted. I don't know, but I can tell you there were, over the last 5 years, there are probably 5 times where I've come down with a cold or something has gone wrong, and almost all the time they come off of one of the best performance weeks that I've had.
So
So I
that
think
you
it's
can
the
tell.
opposite. Yeah, I can tell, but I think it's the opposite.
Yeah.
You've almost got to be more careful. It's kind of like the old Charlie Francis idea. Like, you used to say, if you hit a PR, you're done. Like, you got to go take it in. Like, you hit a PR, workout's over. And I think
Yes.
sometimes, like for me, like I hit that PR. I hit, like, I think 2 years ago, I hit 446 on the bike for 2 miles, and I think I was sick the next week. Boom. And
It's amazing.
that's happened a bunch.
Yeah. All right, Coach, we'll let you go. Thanks for doing this, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right. It's always a pleasure.
Hey guys, it's Allie Gilbert here, the Queen of Men's Health, and we're back for part 3, talking everything men's health, testosterone, everything. So on part 3, I want to talk about how a lot of people think TRT will make all my dreams come true. And a lot of the times the perception is that if somebody goes on testosterone, they're going to turn into an immediately jacked, shredded, like bodybuilder. And that's simply not true, because the purpose of testosterone replacement therapy is simply restoring where you should already biologically be. So say you're a man who is 32, 42, 52. You should have levels of testosterone that are roughly above 600. Not a lot of guys do these days. So going on replacement therapy will bring you above 600. It's not going to bring you to 6,000 or more, where professional bodybuilders tend to live. So going on TRT literally can be game changing for guys who are dialing in their nutrition, their lifestyle, everything, because it can help your recovery. It can help your mental clarity. It can help your ability to sleep. It helps the brain fog. I see all the time when we have clients that we take from having low confidence, low energy, not having the body composition that they're happy with, really coming from a place of feeling stuck. And then they start coaching with us, they start getting their nutrition in order, they start eating a lot better, they start training differently, maybe less training days a week, maybe some more aerobic work, but they really start getting their health markers in order. And then if they have to bring in testosterone replacement, it just amplifies everything they're already doing and allows them to recover a lot better, allows them to have the energy, the confidence, the ability to make decisions and take action. And this is literally what I hear most often from our clients, because they thought, I can do this naturally. I can just dial in my nutrition, lifestyle, everything. And sometimes that does get men in a better place, but it may not bring them to the levels that they operate their best. So when people comment and see people who are in shape and maybe they have a six pack, maybe they look more muscular, thinking that it's just TRT, not always the truth. And I have talked often recently about how there was an article in the Wall Street Journal that said the new CEO flex is having a six pack. And if you take a look at a lot of the well known CEOs of companies such as Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Grant Cardone, Strauss Zelnick, Ari Emanuel, Bob Iger, all those guys are now very tuned in with their health. They look the part. They may or may not have a six pack, but they definitely have better body composition than they did before. And when I talk about this openly on social media, everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people troll me and say, oh, it's because they have money, they have time, they've got steroids, all this stuff. And you know what? I know a lot of people who don't have a lot of money at all, who don't have time, and they look the part and they are able to take care of their health. And honestly, if you're a CEO or an entrepreneur, which many of us are, you don't have a lot of time. No matter how much money you make, time does not become a luxury. So, time is always something that is tough to manage. And the harsh truth is that you're going to have to make time to make your health a priority. And so, yes, some of these guys may be on testosterone replacement, but that's not the reason they look the way they do. It's because of the hard work, dedication, and commitment that they have made to their health to be able to operate at the highest level, function optimally as a man, execute big decisions during the day, but also when they enter a room, they immediately command respect just by how they look. Wanting to fit into your suit, not stuffed into your suit, wanting to have good, tapered, tailored clothing on you, wanting to look good when you have to go to an event or you have to speak or you just go to a party. If you can just walk into that room and people look at you and they respect you because of how you look, it's a great feeling because that means you have discipline, you have grit, you have work ethic, you prioritize your health. Those types of people are who people want to be around, who want to do business with. So that's how looking a certain way taking care of your health can all bleed into your business, into your confidence, all of that. So, to review, going on testosterone replacement is not the pathway to looking like a bodybuilder. Even bodybuilders who are on 10 to 50 times more testosterone than replacement dose still go to the gym. So, replacement dose will bring you to operate at the levels that you're supposed to as a man. And as previously discussed, it will help reduce the likelihood of heart attacks, prostate cancer, all that stuff. It will help you recover better, sleep better, but you cannot ignore addressing your lifestyle, your training, and your nutrition. Those are definitely crucial pieces to the puzzle, especially when it comes to testosterone replacement therapy. So, if you guys would like to learn more, I hope to see you at the Silverback Summit, which is the ultimate men's health event of the year, of the world, happening in just a few weeks in Phoenix, Arizona, November 15 through 16. Come hang out with Anthony and I. Use the code AllieG200 for $200 off your ticket. I hope to see you there.
Welcome back to Naamly's Maximizing the Member Experience segment with your host, Sumit Seth, where we delve into the strategies and tactics that elevate your business and helps you foster personalized connections at scale. Today, we'll explore a simple, creative way to make your gym not just a place to work out, but a community where every member feels valued and involved, transforming your gym's atmosphere and member retention. And that is instilling a sense of responsibility among your members. Giving your members a sense of responsibility doesn't just improve the operational aspects of your gym, but it also enhances their experience, makes them feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, and fosters that vibrant community spirit. Let's start with referrals. Encouraging your members to bring friends and family not only increases your membership numbers, but also makes the existing members feel important. Besides, once the strategy is in place, your existing members get to hang out with people they already know, like, and trust because they got them there, which further increases the bonds they have with your gym and organically leads to increasing their length of stay. So provide them with simple tools and incentives for referrals and watch how they become enthusiastic ambassadors of your gym. Next up, reviews. We know positive online reviews are gold, especially nowadays. Most people are bound to go to review sites to make up their impressions and judgment of whether this is the place they want to be associated with, of whether or not they're going to find the people they want to like to hang out with. So encourage your members to share their experiences on platforms like Google, Facebook, or Yelp, and draw in more people that you already like to serve. Make it easy by sending links to where they can write a review and perhaps incentivize them again with a small reward for their effort. Ethical bribing. Now, this not only enhances your visibility, but also makes members feel their opinions are valued. Another great and underutilized strategy is involving members in onboarding new people. Have a buddy system where seasoned gym goers help newcomers learn the ropes. This not only eases the anxiety for the new members, but also builds a mentorship culture within your gym. Community events are also a fantastic way to build responsibility. Hosting charity runs, local cleanups, joint ventures, health and wellness fairs, where members can volunteer are all amazing ways where members can get a sense of pride and ownership over their contributions to the community, tying their personal identity even closer to their gym. And why not take it a step further? Create a member advisory board or a CAB, customer advisory board, to give feedback on gym operations, classes, or even marketing strategies. Hell, this CAB can also be used to run by unpopular decisions, things that you're toying with, to get a sense of how they will be perceived, almost like a litmus test when you roll it out, such as rate increases. This inclusion can dramatically increase their commitment and satisfaction as they see their ideas and feedback being taken seriously. Incorporating these strategies not only improves your gym's operations and community presence, but fundamentally enhances the way members perceive and interact with your gym. When members feel responsible and valued, they're more likely to stay engaged, maintain their memberships, and promote your gym to others. Implementing these ideas will not just keep your members coming back, but turn them into active participants in the success of your gym. Thanks for tuning into today's segment with me, Sumit Seth, the co-founder of Naamly. If you enjoyed this segment and are interested in getting more insights on elevating your member experience and setting your business up for success, then click the link on this page for a free bundle of resources we've put together.
All right, guys, now it's time for the Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach segment. Today, sometimes I do these things selfishly. You know, I'm a huge hockey fan, and my guest today, Ryan Van Asten, he kind of grew up as a hockey player as well, and played a little pro in Europe, and then got into pursuing his passion for developing hockey players through strength and conditioning. And he recently retired, 12-year career, NHL, 2 Stanley Cups, LA Kings, got to go back home and work with the Calgary Flames for 9 seasons, where he is now, working at the X Factory Athlete Wellness Center. Also wrote a book called Complete Conditioning for Hockey. So always fun to kind of, for me, to kind of look at, have guys on that and gals on who basically, part of the sport, my favorite sport. So, but one cool thing as well, started out with the Canadian Sports Institute. So, worked with the Canadian National Luge team. So we're going to talk to him about that. But Ryan, thanks for doing this, bud.
Thanks, Anthony. I really appreciate it. I've been a long time listener, so it's going to be fun to be on the show. Finally.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. So I know we didn't talk about this originally, but I wanted to get into Luge just because, we were talking about, we're going to get into some of the energy system development. And I do want to remind everybody, and we'll have a link to Ryan's Instagram feed, which is really cool. A lot of great, amazing infographics. By the way, do you do the graphics for those, or does somebody do that for you? Or
no,
pretty
I
good.
do all myself. Yeah,
nice job, man. Those are awesome. Super clear. I don't think anybody has as many. That clap emoji that people put on, you get a lot, because just from the presentation of that, and you make them really clear. But guys, check out Ryan's Instagram. We'll have a link to that as well. But Ryan, you work with luge athletes, and I know nothing about it. I actually did a quick Google search and watched a video. I know what luge is. But I'm just saying, I wanted to really see, if I'm looking at this from the perspective of a strength and conditioning coach, talk to me about what you did with luge athletes and maybe something that you felt like you learned. I don't know if you grew up and did any luge, and now all of a sudden you go to Canada Institute for Sport, and now it's like, hey, Ryan, you're going to work with the luge athletes. So what did you do? What did you learn from this?
Yeah, I was kind of in the same boat as you when I started with the luge team. When I signed on with the Canadian Sport Institute, kind of after grad school, my internships and stuff like that, and they're like, "Oh, we have a contract with the Canadian luge team," and I'm like, "I'm in. Let's go. What's luge?" Honestly, obviously when the Olympics are on, you see it, and once every 4 years, if that. And for me, I was so green to the sport. It was a significant learning experience. I had no idea what they did, how they trained, what they looked like as athletes. I didn't know what they went through during the race or anything about the sport. So it was a significant learning experience for me as a coach to figure out, okay, I need to learn the sport first to figure out exactly what I think they need to do from a training perspective. And it was a lot of fun at the time. I was young. I kind of went all in, invested time. I spent time on the track. I videoed, their starts, which was the main thing that we trained for, was to start. Once they're kind of sliding and racing, there's a lot of other different skill factors and stuff that go along with that. But I did tons of video, watched their training, looked at what they'd done in the past in terms of training, and then just started to try to build like this picture and this plan of like, okay, what am I supposed to do with these athletes? And talk to the athletes and the coach. Our coach at the time was phenomenal. He's a German guy named Wolfgang Staudinger. He went to the 1988 Olympics in Calgary for West Germany, I believe it was, and won a medal there. So lots of experience, and he helped me a ton. But it was a great experience. I had a ton of fun learning how to coach those athletes. And, like I noticed some gaps in some of the training that I thought at the time, and we really worked on those and had a lot of success over the few years that I worked with them.
What were the gaps?
Well, the gaps, to be honest, they were good lugers. But I didn't feel like a lot of them are very good athletes in general. Okay, so like they could lift heavy, lots of power. And luge, I don't know if you guys are familiar with luge. It's not like bobsleigh or skeleton where they're like sprinting down a track. They're sitting on the sled. They have their hands on these handles. They push in and they pull, and then they paddle with their hands. And then they lie down flat on their back and go feet first down. And they go extremely fast, the fastest of the three sports, to be honest. And I just found that they weren't very good athletes in the sense, like you take them out of the gym, you put them on a field, you get them to do even a basic movement pattern like a skip or a bound or something. They struggled with that. And that was actually a big goal of mine, was just to help them become better athletes, have better body awareness, proprioception, just help them move better. And hopefully that translates into, their feel, let's say, on the sled, their the control of their core and their body, which is huge when it comes to steering and G forces, which there's massive G forces going around corners and things like that. And I thought that would also translate into their training in the sense that if they're better athletes, they move better, they prepare better, their lifting will be better, and so forth. And it's kind of a snowball effect a little bit. And we had a lot of success for sure.
Yeah, what did a program look like? I think I guarantee you 90% of the people were thinking they were running with those sleds and sitting on them, right? And so I'm thinking, a lot of sprinting. So yeah, you're in that position and you're doing a lot of upper body. So what did the training session really consist of?
Yeah, so this was I started with them in 07, 08-ish, so quite a few years ago. Really heavy into power cleans, Olympic lifting, hang clean snatches, Olympic lifting type stuff, back squatting, bench pressing, horizontal rows and pull-ups, which is huge. So stuff like that was huge at the time, especially when I came into the sport. That's honestly all they had done for years and years and years, is just those main big lifts. And I kept a lot of that stuff. And I thought that was most of it was important for the sport. But then, I thought doing other things like different types of core training and different types of movement training, I thought were important to incorporate, just from a overall athletic development standpoint, injury prevention or reduction, kind of stuff as well. So, I mean, I think that those were the big things, and it's just like any training. Like you have to do a lot of the basics and be really good at them, which most of these athletes were already really good and really strong and powerful in all these lifts. So for me, it was like, okay, let's just continue to be good at all that stuff, and then maybe we start to add and implement some different things in terms of whatever it may be. Like I said, core and movement training type stuff.
Yeah. Was the core obviously important for everybody? But when I was looking at that short video and I was thinking, okay, never mind the start. Now they have the run, and they're basically in that one position. I felt like almost like it was just an isometric hold the whole time. What was the thought process behind that piece of it? Like what do they need for that? Because I've never been on that, obviously. So what kind of qualities do they need for that? The run piece, like when they're already on it and they're going down the
Yeah.
hill.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think to a degree it is basically just like an isometric hold. However, going into turns and things like that, there's forces that are pulling you in different directions. So you need to have like that sort of, gear to anti-rotation and all these kind of like anti-movements or non-movements per se. They need to be really good at that kind of stuff. Secondly is, neck strength was massive because if you look at Luge, basically their head is not on this sled. And if they're going around a turn at 140 kilometers an hour, the G forces on their head and neck are massive. So they need to have a certain level of strength to keep that up. A lot of the athletes would actually wear um, like a metal cable that attaches here that kind of keeps their chin tucked
Wow.
because they just didn't have the strength. The G forces are so high, they didn't have the strength to not lose their head. And if you lose your head and you can't see, you have to be able to drive out of it. It can be like very dangerous. So a lot of our top males, bigger, stronger guys didn't really need that because they had the neck strength to withstand those G forces. But I think, yeah, in terms of like the core training, it is that like it's the kind of, you have to be a balanced athlete as well, but it is a lot of
Sure.
some of that isometric holding type of stuff as well.
Was there any real conditioning that you were doing that you felt like, okay, this is specific? Because they're at this start or upper body and then they're down on this thing. So what was the conditioning like?
Yeah, I mean the conditioning. Look, the start is depending on the track or the course that they're on. They have a 5-ish paddles with their hands, and then they lie down and they
Yeah.
go. Right? The conditioning to me was more not to necessarily be sport specific, but it was to support their training and how well they can prepare for the training. So, yeah, we did a lot of like anaerobic stuff, but to be honest, at the beginning of, let's say, uh, the off season, beginning of our yearly cycle, we also did a ton of aerobic stuff and work capacity stuff. Um, at the beginning, just so we could train harder throughout the course of the off season in terms of even if it's just our lifting. I think if you have a good conditioning base, you'll be able to lift and perform more work throughout the summer.
Absolutely. And I think it's a good segue into kind of one of the conversations that we want to have today. And that's kind of energy system development and talk about just some of these things because, I must say, as long as I've been doing this, which is, roughly basically right now, I think what's today? Today's the 22nd. I think October 23rd, 2007 was our episode 0. So,
It's amazing.
17 years. So, I'll tell you what, every time I have this conversation, I still can't completely grasp. I think, it's because it's very technical. And then you kind of go back to, let's look at the needs of the sport, et cetera. But I think we've gone back and forth with this idea about aerobic capacity, right? We don't
Yeah.
need it. We need it. Jack Daniels stuff. Jack Daniels originally had, aerobic base. And then people were saying, no, we don't need it. We're just looking at the needs of the sport, right? So if I'm going to look at a luge athlete, I'm going to say, no, I don't need anything, right? So talk to us about this idea about your ideas. You worked mostly with hockey players throughout your career, and this importance of the aerobic base. And let's get into this ESD conversation.
Sure. I mean, Let's be honest. I mean, I think the aerobic system is extremely important. I think if you're a coach and you're not, to help or developing or doing things to develop the aerobic system, or let's say aerobic base. And by aerobic base, I don't necessarily mean going for an hour jog. I work on aerobic base with my athletes, but I never do that with them. So let's be clear on that. And I think it's really important to help set up kind of the rest, or I don't know if you even want to call it, just set up the athlete for success down the road. I mean, I've used this analogy before, and I use it in my book, and I've talked about this. I think of an athlete, and just in general, it's not a perfect analogy. If we think of an athlete as, let's say, an automobile or a race car, for example, horsepower is extremely important. Having a gas tank is extremely important. And then having the ability to refill that gas tank is extremely important. So horsepower, I would say that's your alactic, ATP, CP system. Your gas tank would be your anaerobic glycolytic system. And then your ability to refill that gas tank would be your aerobic system. So as a hockey player in particular, with that sport, it's beneficial to be at least pretty good at all three. If you're missing any one of those components, you're not going to be as good in terms of energy systems. So you can have tons of horsepower and a big gas tank, but if you can't refill that gas tank and recover between shifts or between games or whatever, it's not going to be good for you. So that's why I do think that having a good aerobic system, whether it's aerobic base or any other aerobics component like VO2 max or whatever, lactate threshold, pushing that a little bit further. I think that's all extremely important for hockey and most sports in general.
Ryan, I think a lot of times we look at, or we're getting information from a lot of different places. So, we keep hearing right now about, whatever zone 2 and really it's coming a lot from the longevity, like the Peter Attias, et cetera, for health, right? Most people are health. So are working with, we're trainers, we're working with people and we're working on their health. But you just said, we're not going to go out and jog for an hour. So talk to me about how you are developing the aerobic systems with your players, because you only have a certain amount of time, whether you're in the private sector now, but even when you're with Team Canada or when you're with the Kings or the Flames, you only have X amount of time. What are you doing? Are you trying to get them to do stuff on their own? What are you doing from that when you say, I'm not going to take them out for an hour jog? What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, there are cases where we might do, let's say, 20, 30 minutes bike ride, for example, to do a little bit of zone 2 work. And that's short-lived. If we do any of that, I do that maybe for a couple weeks at the beginning of an off season, once or twice a week, whatever it may be. I think one of the biggest things for me to get some of that aerobic work is the movement training that we do at the beginning of our training sessions. So I place a huge emphasis on that kind of movement aspect with our athletes, and particularly, well, I guess probably throughout the whole off season. A lot of those sessions are 45 minutes long. We're obviously starting ground based, doing some mobility and activation work and whatever, and then getting into sort of dynamic movements, dynamic warm up, movement prep, and then some of the skill and speed work. Some of those sessions honestly are lasting 30, 45 minutes. If you take the heart rate of any one of our athletes during that session, once we start moving, they're averaging 130 to 150 throughout the whole time. And I think that's an important piece that, our main goal for that portion of the training day is movement. But the secondary aspect that we're getting is that kind of aerobic conditioning aspect to it. And then at the end of the session, after we lift and do all that kind of stuff, we might top it up a little bit with a little bit, whatever it is. Could be bike, for example. But that's how I do get a lot of the aerobic stuff in. It's kind of a hidden energy system development where the athletes don't even realize it, but their heart rate's 130 to 150 the whole time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Coach Boyle, I think that's Coach Boyle's biggest argument for that as well. It's like, that's what we're getting that, first of all, they're practicing, right? They're doing their whatever they're doing with their team. And then, he has the My Zone up there. So they're looking at those heart rates the whole time, and they're seeing that, like you said, that elevated heart rate, not during lifting. You're not talking about that, but during that time, that movement prep time. Right.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the confusion for some of us too comes from not from so much the extreme pieces, okay, the aerobic base or interval training, the high intensity stuff. It's kind of in this the middle piece, kind of around that or anaerobic threshold. And you actually have in a couple of your explanations, you were talking about maximum lactate threshold work, A and B, and A actually was in the aerobic capacity, and B gets into the anaerobic, the power piece, right? The aerobic power part. So talk to us about the MLSS. I forget what the SS stands for right now.
Steady state.
Steady state, sorry. And then talk to us about that piece. I think that's where that can really help us understand, getting that middle piece is an important part too. We got the other two down. It's kind of in that middle that I think a lot of people get confused.
Yeah, I mean, that maximum lactate steady state would be, it's basically anaerobic threshold. It's what, kind of intensity that you can work at, the maximum intensity you can work at with how, that lactate starting to skyrocket through the roof. I mean, it's beneficial, obviously, the higher the intensity that you can work at that, it's better. And the more you do that, the more threshold work that you do, the higher the intensity you can do before, that lactate starts to skyrocket before like you just don't have the ability to clear that lactate out of the muscles and the blood as quickly as you can. That's all that is. I mean, MLSS A and B is, I mean, you're splitting hairs, right? Like,
Sure.
Honestly, like if you're an elite cyclist, yeah, maybe you need to really dial it in when it comes to that kind of thing. If you're a hockey player, just trying to make your lactate threshold as high as you can by doing certain types of work. One of them would be maximum lactate steady state if you choose. Other things there's lots of other things you can do to improve that as well. Different types of interval training, lactate capacity, lactate product, like all these different things. They all have a lot of crossover. Like you can do tons of, a lot of your high intensity interval training actually has some crossover from an aerobic standpoint. So, like, honestly, I don't think we need to split hairs too much. But you do need to vary it a little bit.
Yeah. Do you feel like coaches, I mean, some of the practices, I'm only kind of going off of lately, kind of getting back into some stuff, and I wear a heart rate monitor when I go out there for stick time. Right. And I'll specifically do kind of geek out on it and do some sprinting and some different things with the puck. And then I'll go sit down. And I'm looking at my heart rate, and I'll let it get down and kind of try to replicate what might happen. In a men's league, it's 1-to-1 really, but I'm not in a men's league right now. But I will say I did this little workshop and with other players, and man, I'll tell you what, looking at the heart rate, it was up super high. Obviously I'm 57 years old, but it's going to be a little higher than the average bear. But I think those practices, there's really a lot of elevation in there, especially even when you're playing short sided. We're doing some short sided games, etc. Those things, man. I mean, my heart rate I got up to 184. I didn't realize my heart rate, by the way, got up that high. That was news to me. I got out there with these guys. And so talk to me about that piece of it and how you have to manage that piece of it for strength coaches who have players and they're out there and they're getting that stuff already.
In terms of like if you're coaching with a team,
you're
asking. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Like I think about myself just like you. done the same, wear a heart rate monitor when I'm playing beer league or shinny. And my heart rate gets way higher doing that than if I'm trying to push it on a treadmill or a bike.
Yeah.
I just can't get it that high.
Yeah.
But when I'm having fun and you're out there playing, it's way different. It's way higher. And it's the same for these players. I mean, I think it's really important as a strength coach or a performance director with a team is not only are you, monitoring external load, like let's say with a catapult or something like that, but the internal load is extremely important too. I think you need to utilize that kind of heart rate piece if that's the route that you want to go, and then just collect your data to see, what types of external loads and what types of drills per se are causing these spikes, and how do these athletes respond post the next day if you're doing things like HRV, to see how they're recovering from that in the games and all those kinds of things. I think it's extremely important that you are measuring that, especially at the higher levels of hockey. And not just measuring, I mean, you have to have conversations with the coaching staff and, try to affect change. I know that's easier said than done. I've had worked with many coaches in the past that's just, they're just doing what they've done and that's how they do it. And they've had success doing that, and that's fine. They're the coach and they can do that. But I think it's important that you at least have to attempt and bridge that gap, to help them understand what's the best from a physiology standpoint in terms of what they're doing in terms of work and how they can recover from that. Just understanding the drills, like I think depending on the coach, a lot of times, how long they've been doing it. Let's say like Daryl Sutter, for example. I worked with Daryl for almost 6 years of my 12-year NHL career. And he had this like innate sense of, he might not have understood heart rate or external load or anything like that, but he had this innate sense of workload and what the types of drills and things they were doing on the ice and how they affected the athletes. And he was really good at that, I thought. And he almost always aligned with what I would prescribe as a strength coach and director of performance, to the coaching staff in terms of that. So I guess long story short is, yeah, I think you need to be monitoring both external and internal load, and then you can start to develop trends and things like that and develop a database of drills and what causes certain spikes and what's easier, what's harder, those kind of things.
Yeah, I think too, we have to understand it's even more important now. So basically from finding out some of this research, understanding some of the things we could do outside of the gym as well. For example, we always knew nutrition was important, but I was telling you earlier, I'm listening and reading to Good Energy by Casey Means. Highly recommended for anybody. Just talking about just some different things on really, the mitochondria and how what we're putting in our body, even like going as far as like plastics, all the plastics we're exposed to, the sugar, the added sugar, the different oils, the different how what we're putting into our body and how what some of these ingredients that we're putting in our body affects our energy. And then something like even like the sauna, we're seeing all this research on, and you had a nice infographic on that as well, and like the benefits of the sauna. One of them is improved aerobic capacity, and we've seen that like from a bunch of different people. There's a lot of research on that. So it's really important to kind of understand, like it's almost like a cheat code, like, hey, all right, we don't have time for that, but now we're killing a few birds with the sauna. Like get them in the sauna for X amount of time and maybe help improve their aerobic base as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's all kinds of different things you can do that are, let's say, passive that can benefit you in terms of aerobic or whatever it may be. Sauna for sure is one of them. I highly recommend it to all of my athletes. I think it's a really beneficial tool. I know a lot of athletes don't have access to that, and it's tough to gain it. But if you can, there's tons of health benefits with sauna, not just aerobic benefits, but mental health benefits, relaxation, helps you sleep better, all kinds of different things. So using tools like that are extremely important. You talked about nutrition. Um, it's quote unquote passive, but what you eat is certainly going to affect your performance, how your aerobic system responds to things, how your anaerobic system responds to things, the supplements that you take, like creatine monohydrate, you know, obviously tons of benefits, not only for health, but from a performance standpoint. Are these like some of the things that, the athletes are doing on a day-to-day basis that aren't training per se, but are arguably just as important?
Absolutely. I thought there was a really good, another infographic that you were talking about and along these same lines. And it was talking about oxygen deficit and oxygen debt. And what really kind of struck me was I've never really heard anybody kind of talk about how those are related to why the importance of the gradual warm up, so you can minimize that oxygen deficit and help that cardiovascular system adjust. And that's going to enhance oxygen delivery to the muscles. And then engaging in low intensity post exercise activity aids recovery by sustaining elevated oxygen consumption, accelerating the return to resting physiological conditions that you were talking about. So, can you talk to people about the oxygen deficit and oxygen debt and how that's going to relate to how important it is, again, for those warm ups, that gradual warm up, and then that post exercise cool down?
Yeah, I mean, this is huge. Like, we've all experienced this. Go for a run or a bike, and the first few minutes, you're just dying, burning. Legs are burning, you're dying. And that is essentially this oxygen deficit scenario. I mean, I've had this with several athletes at the NHL level, highly anaerobic individuals, produce a ton of lactate, ton of power, aerobic systems, just by nature of this type of athlete, weren't as strong. So, like, a lot of times you're going to see that guys that are high power, aerobic systems aren't as strong. And then vice versa. Guys that have a huge aerobic system might not have as much power. Not always the case, but seems to be pretty common. And one of these athletes in particular, when he was in his rookie season, would always tell me how he felt terrible at the beginning of the games. During warm-up, beginning of games, he felt terrible. And as the game went on, he started to feel way better. Played his best hockey later in the game. So that's exactly what we did. Was we did a very extended warm up, starting with bike, like we're super low level, low power, low level, gradually built that up in terms of intensity for 20, I can't remember, 20 to 30 minutes, even say low intensity for most of it, and just try to build that up, kind of get that aerobic system going, get the enzymes going, get everything, blood flowing to the muscles, all that stuff. And he would do his dynamic warm up, all that kind of stuff on the ice. And it made a huge, huge difference in terms, he felt so much better right off the hop. Now, the thing is, it's time intensive, right? So it has to be structured properly, has to fit within the system of whatever team you're on and meetings and all that kind of stuff. But it has a huge benefit in terms of if you have an athlete that's like that, to help them feel like they're ready to go right off the hop and that they don't have a huge oxygen deficit right away. The flip side is the oxygen debt component. This is why cool down is important, because as soon as you stop playing or training or whatever, I mean, it's going to take your body a little bit to get back to normal, to get back to that equilibrium. If you do a little bit of a cool down, keep the blood flowing to the muscles, that process will happen a little bit quicker. And you'll get back to kind of steady state homeostasis, whatever that is, a little bit quicker. In my opinion, I think that oxygen deficit piece from a performance standpoint is much more important, especially in hockey.
Yeah. Funny. It takes me like, I think it takes me like right now at this age, like 20, I get in off the ice, it takes me like 20 minutes to get my equipment off. It's
Oh,
so
yeah.
bad. It's
Yeah.
so bad. I'm like thinking, I can't even move right now.
You sound like me.
I heard Matt Sundin was on right now he's on like Spit and Chicklets or something. I think
Oh,
Spit
yeah.
and Chicklets. And he was talking about Guy Lafleur. And he's a rookie around Quebec and he goes in. Did you hear that? He's like
I heard this, yeah.
3 hours before he's like Guy Lafleur has his equipment on like 3 hours before the game. He's like skates are tied, everything. It's just crazy.
That is crazy.
So let's now I want to go to talk a little bit about in season, off season. You've kind of dealt with super tricky situations. You guys win the cup. Kings win the cup in 2012. 13, there's a lockout. So you don't play till January. That actually might have been helpful for you guys because, hockey, the Stanley Cup goes to June, but now you can't be with the guys, I'm sure, for all that time. The season starts in January. You guys still go to the conference finals. We're still talking June.
Yep.
And then you got to restart camp in September, which coincidentally you win the Stanley Cup now in 2014 again. Let's talk about some of the things, your goals, because we've seen people were talking always the word maintenance, like guys like Bob Alejo, Coach Boyle, like, no, you could still get stronger in season, kind of pushing back on the whole maintenance idea. It's always individual, obviously, because some guys, when we just want to make sure they don't get hurt. But talk to us about your goals for this ideas about in season and off season training.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of I align to a degree with Coach Boyle in the sense like I don't ever think of it as maintenance per se. Like if we're training, I mean, we have a goal to get better. Like I don't think I would ever go into a session being like, okay, we're not trying to get better today. We're just gonna be status quo, right? Like I don't understand that. Now, I do understand that in-season training is significantly different than off-season training in the sense that the training itself is not the priority in season. The priority in season is playing games and being ready to play in those games. So your training is going to be different to make sure that happens, that you're ready to play in the game. And what does that look like? I mean, for me, every coach is different. But for me, I think, everyone talks about the microdosing, and I think that's important. I think when I was coaching in the NHL, like my idea was we're going to train every day. Obviously, we're not doing max strength work every day. We're not doing tons of volume every day. We do low volume. And the variables that we're going after are going to change depending on the game schedule. And the whole idea is to, maximize performance for the game. What that looks like obviously is dictated by the schedule, but I always thought that we should be doing something every day, whether that's just core work and mobility work. To me, that's training. There's a goal in getting better in that sense. Off season is different. The priority for off season training or the off season is training. I mean, that is the job for the athlete in the off season is to train. So the volume is going to be significantly higher. Intensities at a lot of places are probably going to be significantly higher. Energy system work is probably going to be more extensive, depending on the athlete. It's just, you are working on a lot of the same qualities in season, off season. I think the biggest difference would probably be volume and then how you would structure those programs throughout the course of a week or a month, let's say.
Right. You said one of the in-season objectives would be sport-specific conditioning. So, we've been talking about a lot of conditioning. So in season, what does that mean for, the main players? I'm not talking about maybe the guys that get scratched and they're going to be on the bike, but right now, but that aren't playing as much. But what does that mean for you, sport-specific conditioning for, let's stay with hockey right now.
Yeah, I mean, if you're for hockey players, players that are playing every game, especially big minutes guys, and practicing, I honestly don't think that they need to be doing a lot of additional conditioning work off the ice. I think the practices, most of these guys are skating every day, minus a day a week, so 6 times a week, sometimes twice in a day if you include pregame skate. I really don't think that they need to be doing a ton of additional conditioning work. Even honestly, the guys that play less than 10 minutes a night, they might need a little bit more, but they're still skating every day. They're still on the ice practicing drills. Those guys in particular, most of the time are staying out doing extra work with coaches. You might do a little bit extra with those guys. The ones that need to do a little bit more are the guys that are healthy scratched, that aren't necessarily playing in all the games. I think that their energy systems development training needs to be significantly different than guys that play in the games.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you feel like we go back to this aerobic, we were just talking about how when we're out there and the heart rate is much higher than we thought, and I'm sure you're seeing that with the players as well. But, you just talked about all the skating they're doing. So the off ice stuff would probably just kind of keep that aerobic, just kind of keep things moving, keep that heart rate, almost like to go back to the zone idea, the zone 2 stuff, just to kind of keep them moving.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, at that level, I probably
Yeah.
wouldn't do a
Not
lot of
even.
it off the ice anyways. Most
Yeah.
of the conditioning that they're doing is on the ice. I don't understand why you would do that off the ice in the first place, unless it is okay. If it's you wanted to work on, let's say, VO2 max, for example, in your interval training, but the intervals are a little bit longer. Let's say you're doing a 2 or 3 minute interval. Yeah, you wouldn't want to do that on the ice. It's too taxing. Lower backs start to hurt. Things like that. It's just too long to do on the ice. But that's relatively rare. We're not doing a ton of that work anyways. But most of the conditioning, I think, is done on the ice. And then they might do some cool down stuff, kind of zone 2 light aerobic, on a bike, let's say, post game or practice.
Let's move into kind of finish up with, you have an interesting situation. We talked a little bit beforehand. I was asking you about it. You went from Team Canada to NHL, 12 years NHL, now private sector, and coaching in all of those different aspects. And there is a myth about coaching elite athletes, like everything's so easy, and it's not. We know there's a lot of different personalities. You're dealing with certain things that you have to kind of tiptoe around for certain athletes and whatever. Let's talk. You had a nice infographic about coaching hacks. What I know, what I know now that I wish I knew 20 years ago. Then also, when I had asked you like what you wanted to talk about, you're talking about like mindset, intent, culture, relationships, and I think this all ties together with that contrast between working with teams and in like a team setting, a pro setting, into the private sector. Talk to us about some of the coaching pieces that you wish you were doing maybe when you were a little younger, and some things that you've learned along the way.
Well, I think it's a really good question and topic, to be honest. And the biggest thing for me that I've learned over the years, whether it's I'm working with pro athletes or minor hockey players or general population, is it is about relationships. It's about the relationships you build with these individuals. And it's, I mean, we've heard this before. no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. You build a relationship with these athletes. They trust you. You get, you start to build that respect that they give you. Then, as a result, they're going to do what you ask them to do because they trust you. If they don't trust you and they don't want to do what you're going to do or you want them to do, doesn't matter what kind of program you have. It could be the best program in the world. If it's not done or it's not done properly or with intent, it's not going to be very good. So I think that's it for me, and talking to a lot of the young coaches and interns and things like that I have. It's about the relationship piece with those athletes. Like I said, regardless of whether they're pros or a general population, they need to know that you care about them, and that's the biggest part for me.
Yeah. Was it easier in the pros though, from the perspective of like you know who the leaders in the room are. We know who the captain is. Like you really, at the end of the day, we really said, what's the shortcut there? It's go to the leaders, make sure the leaders start with the leaders. I'm not saying we don't have to worry about everybody else, but once you get them on board, there is a trickle down effect. Whereas in the private sector, a little more hard to make sure you got buy-in or, that trust from all of your athletes.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's challenges in both. I do think, like in the pros, when I just look back to my first stint in the pros with the Kings. Like these guys, like they have a level of skepticism, right? And for me, it wasn't like I'm going to come in there guns blazing. We're doing exactly what I want to do. Where everything you've done in the past is terrible, and this is the way it has to be. That was the exact opposite of what my approach was. My approach was get to know the guys, like you said, talk to leadership group, kind of develop that relationship, buy-in in that sense, and then make these changes, what I thought needed to be changed over time. And then eventually, we're just doing what I want to do in the sense. But right off the hop, it was more about, like you say, building those relationships with kind of the leadership group. And I've been fortunate, to be honest. Like both organizations that I worked with had a really good training culture. I went to the Kings. We had several guys, like Matt Green, Justin Williams, Jonathan Quick, guys that trained, and that's just part of who they were and what they did on a day-to-day basis. And if you have guys like that, Dustin Brown, he was a captain at the time in LA, and Mark Giordano in Calgary. If you have guys like that are training every day, it's kind of hard for the rookies and the younger guys on the team to be like, I don't feel like it, right? It's just part of that culture. In terms of the general population, or if you're working with private clients, I really do think it's kind of the same thing. I mean, in my case, it's been maybe even a little bit easier because I, have come from an NHL background, and most of the athletes that I'm working with now, that's their goal, is to get to that level. And so I kind of have automatically, without them even knowing me, I kind of have that level of respect, I guess, from their side. Like I don't have to prove myself to a degree. Now, initially, right? Like if they came in and they hated me and I was not a nice person to them, didn't try to do all that, develop the relationship, obviously it wouldn't work. But the initial part is they just assume I know what I'm doing, and I don't have to prove myself initially. And then the rest kind of falls into place.
Yeah, and it's not like you weren't the Edmonton strength coach in Calgary. You know what I mean? So
yeah, exactly.
they would have hated you there.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Ryan, I really appreciate you coming on. I love what you're doing on the social media stuff with all the infographics. I think we can learn a ton from it, and a lot of it goes back to you can get all this information in your book, Complete Conditioning for Hockey. So I appreciate you coming on here and kind of going over some of these topics that you talk a lot about on your social media and in your book. So thanks again for doing this.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. Like I said, I've been a long time listener. You said that I think your first episode was 07. I honestly remember standing on the luge track, videoing, my hands freezing cold with an old iPod, listening to your podcast was on luge track in like 08. So
nice.
Yeah.
Love it. Love it. All right, guys, that's going to do it for episode 389 of the Strength Coach Podcast. The show notes are located at strengthcoachpodcast.com. Don't forget, you can try strengthcoach.com and MBSC out for 7 days for free. Special thanks to Chris Poirier and the folks over at Perform Better. Remember that Perform Better Signature Series line, changing the game when it comes to weight training. The Signature Series racks are now fully customizable. The cable column options are now available. And the Signature Series plate-loaded line will give you a sleek look while providing an easy and simple way to train. Check it all out at performbetter.com. Thanks to Coach Boyle and Ryan Van Asten for sharing their insights and philosophies into the world of strength conditioning, performance enhancement, and conditioning. Thanks to Sumit, Seth, and Naamly, helping build relationships through personalized communication so your members stay longer and pay longer. Check out the show notes for Naamly's free Fitness Business Boost Bundle. 3 gifts to you, a checklist, 51 ways to acquire clients without running ads, a cheat sheet, 12 places to look to hire star trainers, and a guide, 9 secrets to increase your retention. Thanks to Ali Gilbert. Ali's doing the Silverback Summit again this year. It'll be in Phoenix, November 15th and 16th. It's coming up. I will be there. I'm pretty excited about it. You can use the code ALIG200 to get $200 off. Check it all out at silverbacksummit.com. That's going to do it for this episode. My name's Anthony Renna. Thanks for listening, and I'll speak to you next time.